What does world-class real estate look like to you?
It's about creating relationships,
consistent communication,
estate agency with a great culture, who care for their people, who care for their clients, who care for their customers, without just looking at the number at the end of the commission check.
I think it's about amazing customer service.
It's about people, not property.
Thank you to Iceberg Digital for sponsoring the podcast and making all this possible.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the World Class Real Estate Podcast. As you know by now, I'm Mark Worrell. I'm joined by Mr. Ian Macbeth. And we are the day after the transfer deadline day. We've got a great guest coming on today, so we're going to have a proper agency chat. A very quiet transfer deadline day yesterday for any football fans that were listening. This will be a week after. You probably have forgotten about it. It was so insignificant, I would imagine.
I caught up on it when I got home just to see if there was any stuff. And in fact, I went to press play on one of the Sky News apps to give a Chelsea update. And funnily enough, and this will make sense in a minute, funnily enough, an advert came up. Obviously it does before you watch any video on Sky Sports apps these days. And the advert said, it was about a Galaxy mobile phone. And it said something along the lines of, if your friend messages you a question and your phone knows the answer, shouldn't it just reply? And I was actually in the bath and I was thinking, do I like that or do I not like that? Obviously it's AI, it's tech. It's the evolution of what might happen. Am I happy if my wife asks me a question and my phone knows the answer for it to just reply to my wife or not? And I don't know whether I'm quite there yet. But it was quite interesting nonetheless. And I think that's a good way to segue into today's guest, because we're going to talk about the tech side of it and whether we're happy with not dealing with it as a human or whether we would want the human to reply. I'd probably want to reply to my wife, if I'm honest with you, because it could be an awkward conversation if it goes wrong. But would you want the tech to reply to your clients, or is that conflicting in its own way? I don't know. Do you have an answer to that? What's your thoughts?
My thought is, if I got a text message from the wife that said, "Where are you?" and the phone replied, "In the pub," and we'd not had the conversation about me maybe nipping in for a pint after work on a Friday night, that might get me in trouble. I'm not there. We've talked about the AI video generation and stuff, and obviously we're going to have a chat about this with today's guest. I am a little bit skeptical about leaning too much into it, and I think that's probably a nice way to introduce today's guest and ask David to come on. So David Mintz has been on the podcast before. He was a member of our mastermind group, but he's not working as much, although still involved in the agency that he's been involved in with many years, and obviously does a lot of work with Kerfuffle now and looking at AI or just general tech advancements for agents. And I think this conversation probably isn't going to go the way that people expect that it will.
Yeah, I would agree. And a good guy, a good agent, a lifer, let's call him a lifer in the agency game. And definitely someone that I think when we ask key questions, people that listen to this on the regular will make notes and really deep dive think into his responses and answers. So should we get him on?
Yeah, let's get him on.
David, welcome to the show. Part 2, this is for you. When was part 1? Many moons ago?
I checked it out last night. I think it was episode 86 or something like that.
Top
it was 100. When a fresh-faced Mark Worrell, he was only a young lad then.
16.
Just started out. And Ian you weren't there. So I was talking to Sam Hunter, your predecessor.
Yeah, I wasn't even born as a host at that point.
Episode 87. I think this will be 343 or something like that. We are getting on a little bit now. Thank you very much for joining us again, David. And we'll open as we do now, which is probably different to actually the first time. I think we closed with this question way back when, but it is our favourite question. What does world-class real estate look like to you?
Well, I know what I answered last time, so I'm going to give you a different answer this time. I think the world-class real estate is doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. And you've got to do them consistently, you've got to do them ethically. and you've got to take total responsibility for them as well.
How has that changed from the last one? What's the evolution of that answer?
I think at the last one, I think I said something like, you have to sort of be it's something along the lines of you have to have a personality and you have to be your authentic self, which I still stand by and I still believe. But I think if you could do the basics really well and channel them through your personality, I think then, you're set up for life in a estate agency.
So the devil is in the detail. Can you give some examples of those ordinary things and how listeners or agents in general can do them extraordinarily well?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that, you guys will pick up on this all the time, and I'm sure it is not this way in your businesses, because I know who you're trained by, and I know what your philosophies are. But there are so many businesses out there that I talk to where the negs, right? Even just that phrase, the negs. It's a phrase without any personality. It's a phrase without any responsibility, and doesn't really. It's just a title. It's like saying cadets. So it's the people with the least amount of responsibility in the business are entrusted with having those first conversations with your public, and those conversations invariably are rushed. No one's taking the time to sort of really get into the reasons why they're moving, what's going on behind the move, what's going to be important to them when you go around and see them on a valuation, what do they want to hear about, and we assume it's kind of a one size fits all. And I think in most agencies you will get rushed off the phone. On a bad day in say the agency that I've been involved with, that would happen if you're under pressure, then absolutely. But I think on a good day, if you can just take the time to be a human being and do something ordinary, which is ask somebody how they are, try and find out why they're calling you today, and what is it that's really driving the move. I think it informs, to me as a valuer anyway, when you send me in, I've got so much more information then on which to build my relationship with them. So I think sometimes it's those sort of things, Mark. I think that we tend to sort of scoot over as an insignificant part of our business because we want the phones to get answered and we want people to get dealt with. And that's why, I suppose, when you're looking at technology out there at the moment, so much of it is this AI will take care of those inquiries coming in. You don't want to deal with those pesky inquiries. Actually, you want to find a way to have more of those conversations and to slow the relationship down. And then, I think it's good for the business in the long run.
There must be, I don't know, let's say there's 100 touch points per transaction, per property sale before the estate agent gets paid. Do you think that percentage now is even more important to do what you just said, which is talk to the person, agent to person, ask the right questions to get the best information? And I kind of say with the best information, the client can make the best decision. But do you think those percentage of touch points, as you mentioned tech and AI and your connection with kerfuffle and things like that as well, you see what's coming through probably quicker than most people do in the industry, what the next sort of prop tech product is? Do you think more of that percentage should be tech based so that you can spend more time on those bits that are important?
I think so. I think there's a lot of stuff that can be done really well, that used to take up all our time in terms of getting people to sign, even onboarding, right? So I will throw out a plug to a couple of companies just as an example of the kind of tech that is changing some of these things. There's Cattini and there's Moverly, and there's companies like that who specialize in, basically, if you've not invested in tech yourself and you've not built an online onboarding platform for you, a digital first onboarding platform for your customers, then out of the box you can have this and it can plug straight into whichever AML provider you wanted to use. So it doesn't have to conflict with your systems, but that part of the process, actually, most of the customers do expect a digital onboarding process because at Amazon, we get one. At any other online service, we get one. Even at the school nowadays, when you're registering for something or other, you do it online and that's it. So I don't need to spend the time or having the staff tied up, if you like, having those conversations, chasing paperwork. Please, Ian, will you return that form? Ian, will you come into the office with a copy of your passport and a bank statement, please? I desperately want to photocopy it and lose it in one of my files. All that sort of stuff that we used to have our time taken up by. That is absolutely the kind of automation that gets it out of the way and gets done. I think if we're going to give some other plugs to people that we know are doing great work out there, people like Mike Nettleton, people like Luke Sinclair, they are taking care of the stuff that sits in the background. So when we're not in the office, so when we're at home running our marathons or whatever it is that you guys do when you have downtime. Don't know what you do, Mark, but I know what Ian does because he tells us.
I'm not running that length on that.
You have to run to keep up with him. But what they're doing is effectively allowing people to take that time off and knowing that the inquiries are going to be looked after. And that there's a process in place so that when we get in the morning, we're not spending the first 2 hours of the business day going, there's one for you, Mark, and Ian, can you call this one? He wants a valuation, and can you book this one? And another one for that house. You don't need to do that anymore because you've got a process. They're being asked questions. They're being engaged with when they want to be engaged with. So if you've got somebody that's making an inquiry at 6 p.m. at night, they're getting a response at 6 p.m. at night. And I think that's important. And it also allows you to get on with your job. It then, as Ian says, frees you up to have those conversations. So I think the tech that is doing the heavy lifting of the kind of boring, mind-numbing stuff that takes up time, and it can add value because that tech, I think, makes customer service better than the human equivalent. And then if you can just then allow your team members to have a little bit more care on viewings. I got a phone call from somebody the other day, said, David, can I have your help? I've been to have a look at a house and I've got all of these questions. I don't know how to put them to the estate agent, and I've had a survey done and they seem very dismissive. And the bottom line for them was that they are spending, I think in that case, they're spending it's quite a cheap house by today's standards. I think they're spending 280 grand on something, but it is their first house. It's every penny of everything that they've ever got. Mm. And they said that they've been allowed all of 15 minutes on a viewing. And so they asked for a second viewing, and the guy stood there checking his watch, saying that they've got to be out there in 50 minutes. So for £280,000 worth of investment, you are going to spend 30 minutes inside the property. And by the way, that's not a singular experience. So that actually is the experience of most people that buy a house in this country. We don't do open houses in the way that, some of us do, and those that do them remarkably well. And the idea of an open house is exactly that. It's open. It's relaxed. They can take their time. You're not going to clock watch. You give them time to have a look around. But mostly, when you're going to have a look at a house, you're rushed in and out of that thing within an inch of your life. The agent doesn't care because you're a means to an end for them. It's just at that point, and very often the viewings aren't even carried out by anybody with a particular degree of skill. Yep. As long as they've got a heartbeat and a driving license, bang, they're there. So I think if we took more care on stuff like that, that's really where people perceive a difference. And so this poor buyer who has got all of these different questions, I think I've spent more time test driving cars than I have done in viewing houses that I've bought for a lot of money. It's a major decision that we make for like an average viewing time of 15 minutes, I reckon.
Yeah, it's bonkers when you actually break it down. I was talking to someone, I was talking to an estate agent that started his estate agency business about a year ago. And he was picking my brains because they were struggling a little bit with some fall-throughs, some bomb-outs in the pipeline. And I mentioned reservation agreements to him. I said, do you come across it? And he was like, that sounds ridiculous. And I was like, well, if you buy a car, you reserve it. If you buy a new build, you reserve it. If you rent a property, you reserve it. If you spend £280,000 on your house, you have a look at it for 30 minutes and then maybe in 4 months' time you say yes and sign and it's legally binding. Like, it is actually mental, the process of how it works. And I don't know, maybe there'll be a bit of a reform on it. There's rumours that potentially it will be. Obviously, we're seeing it with lettings at the moment, a change of how it unfolds, and maybe things like that do change, you know, where estate agents are committed and legally bound to give a buyer the right amount of time. There's a lot of things that have been put in place recently for tenants to have a lot of power in the decision making and the process. Maybe buyers need a little bit of that support along the way as well. As you mentioned it there, it does sound a bit horrifying, doesn't it? But we've mentioned those processes, I guess, a couple of times. It's interesting, those companies that are trying to make things that little bit better. And me and Mark did a training session the other day with someone that was talking about good, powerful questions and different ways to ask the right questions. I don't know, what do you think of the three main bits? I would always say, like, the valuation, the viewing, and negotiating the offer are the three, like, those are the touch points where you really need to be, as an agent, kind of almost in a quiet space, you know, just totally focused on that client and just ultimately in the zone. I always used to find with negotiators back in the day when I was a traditional agent, we used Repeat as a CRM at the time. A buyer would call in to register for a viewing, and the neg would say, "Are you registered?" is the first thing. They'd say no. And then the first thing you see is they open up an applicant window on Rightmove. The phone goes like this, and that's it. We are data entering for the next 6.5 minutes. And it was just such an awful process of the first point, like you mentioned. It is crazy when you think about it, and you say it like you said it then, David. It does blow my mind a little bit.
Yeah. And it's crazy. So, I mean, you had a guest just before Christmas, our friend Stephen Brown. And if you do any kind of training with Stephen Brown, and I would encourage all of you to do some sort of training with Stephen Brown if you're listening to this. He's a lovely man and he knows his stuff, but I promise you, he's not going to teach you anything you don't already know. And he won't mind me telling you that. He will just remind you, like all good training, he'll remind you of what it is that you have forgotten to take the time to do and why it's so important to do it. One of the questions he will encourage you to ask is, if you get on a phone call, you know, and you manage to keep the person on the phone that long, can you ask them whether they've got other properties? Are you going to ask them who recommended them to your agency? How many agencies are actually taking the time to ask those questions rather than, 3 bedrooms, 200,000, you can see it Wednesday at 12. And that's exactly how those conversations tend to go, because we get focused in on how can I get rid of this annoying call and how can I whack it into the diary. And know that running through my head when I pick up that call, if I'm a neg, but running through my head if I'm taking that call and I'm going to register somebody is, once I've had the conversation, I've then got to go through these steps of, like Ian said, you know, filling in the database or whatever CRM that you're using and satisfying that as well. We just need to ask ourselves some questions about that experience and whether or not we're actually going to be trusted by anybody. And you're building relationships. And I think one of the criticisms that I got from other people as I was kind of coming up and learning my trade is that I take too much time to talk to somebody. And if I go to the supermarket and bump into somebody and they go, "Oh, can I just talk to you about this?" I'll be stood there in half an hour still talking to them about their move or whatever it is. But you know, I haven't stepped foot inside an estate agency properly for about 5 years now, and yet my phone rings every day with people wanting me to help them move. And I think that says something. I think that is the investment of time that I put in at the beginning, both in terms of getting perhaps my profile out there so that people know what it is that I do, but also them knowing that I will take the time to talk to them regardless of what's in it for me. And I think that's a big thing.
Yeah, for sure.
That's building relationships. A lot of the stuff, as you said, that Stephen will talk about is stuff that people know, but actually you've got to be very intentional. In a industry that becomes very reactionary, you've got to be very intentional about finding that time We've talked a little bit about tech and how tech can give us back some of the time to enable those conversations. I'm assuming the good agents that you speak to at Kerfuffle are using it for that process to actually try and have better conversations and ultimately build better relationships for better business performance. But where are you finding the biggest wins for agents? You mentioned a couple of things, particularly onboarding, which has changed a lot over the last few years. So let's not go back over that. But where are you finding agents are finding the biggest wins in terms of using tech to buy back their time?
It's interesting. It depends what your business is heavy on. So I tend to, my wheelhouse was always sales. And I found the letting side of the business to be really tedious, and needs a lot of attention and so on. However, that's not, but we've now been told the modern education is your business is worth jack if you haven't got a lettings side to it. Which I'm not, by the way, I'm not convinced that's the case. I think that people are always going to need to buy and sell houses. And I think the way that we monetize that needs to be looked at. And I think we need to perhaps all of us sit down and decide that we're going to do things differently in order for us to have something we can hand over to somebody else when we eventually come to sell our businesses. But at its core, lettings businesses is where all the focus is. So all those people that are doing all these mergers and acquisitions, all they're interested in is the size of your lettings book. So I think there's an awful lot of wins there. So there's tech that's all designed to either cut out the interaction. So at its core, years ago, Good Lord was revolutionary. Why was it revolutionary? Well, because it cut out all the faff in between the initial viewing and the moving in. Because what we used to find was that we'd view it, then they'd come back in with some ID documents, then they'd come back in with a bank statement, then they'd come back in with and they were feeding it piecemeal into the system. Whereas Good Lord kind of took them out of our office and gave them an online process, and we never saw them till it was time to move in. They'd already been served their documents automatically at that point and all of that. So, there are plenty of companies that do just that for different parts of the lettings process. You can now process a rent roll that used to take, we would book literally a week out of the diary just to pay landlords because we were doing it manually. We wanted to check we were doing it properly. That now all gets automated. People that are using systems like PayProp, like Agent Pay, like Let's Pay, they can do it from their sun lounger on holiday if they want to, famously. So I think when you take, that's where the real wins are in terms but most companies, this is controversial, who are winning from this, they are not refocusing their staff on going after other stuff. So what we say is, if your staff don't have to spend 3 days a week paying landlords and they can spend 3 hours a week paying landlords, then the rest of the time they can build relationships. The rest of the time they can be talking to tenants that might become a homeowner at some point. That's just simply not happening. So we're not very good at following up.
It's a funny one. It's a funny one, isn't it? I know it's something that you're involved in as well with the acquisition aspect of things, but it's a funny one, the way estate agencies are valued or are purchased, because it goes against everything in business in general. It's like a metric that just doesn't exist outside of estate agency, which we say that quite commonly, don't we? And I get the lettings valuation because it's reoccurring income. It's not seen as a transaction. It's arguable. But I get the value of that side of things. But from a sales point of view, you mentioned that you'd put a lot of time and effort into relationships, marketing, profiling, and now your phone rings with business.
Yeah.
Whereas if there was a sales-only estate agency that's done that for 30 years and invested potentially millions in their marketing, their branding, building trust and a reputation, their phone rings and they turn over £1 million a year, but they don't do lettings. I can't see how someone says that's not valuable. There's an unbelievable opportunity to acquire those sort of businesses at a fair metric that sits away from the brokerages, that are kind of doing these transactions that tell you different. If you were an outside of estate agency business owner, you would look at those and you'd just hoover them up, because what an opportunity to acquire great businesses that do a lot of turnover, that also bring in a lot of data, which is a lot of value. It does surprise me. I think in 2024, B&W turned over nearly 150 million euros, in terms of how they operate. But they spent like tens of millions of let's call it pounds in marketing. And the only reason they spent tens of £1 million in marketing is because Mercedes and Audi did, because they had to keep up the competition. Yeah. We're in quite a fortunate industry where estate agents don't spend that amount of money in marketing, because the bar is quite low in terms of the marketing, especially digital marketing spend. But it does blow my mind that that's how it's valued. Do you think that will ever change, David? In terms of that
it depends where we see value. So going back to your car analogy, if you were to look at the price of petrol and oil, it's all set by these OPEC and these great big conglomerates, because that's what's important to them, mostly because they're involved in selling oil. So they're very interested in what the valuation would be. I think the value of our businesses is being set by companies like, and I appreciate that there are others out there, so please don't throw the book at me, but people like the Lohman Group, for instance, who've swallowed up every lettings book up and down the country. If they're the majority of buyers, and so if you go to somebody like Lucy Noonan, etc., and you ask her, right, what's the value of my business? She'll come back and she'll tell you, well, at the moment, the multiple is XYZ because this is what Lomond are paying. I think that those big conglomerates, if you like, our industry equivalent of the conglomerates, are now setting the price for what our businesses are worth, and they are making us believe that our sales businesses are worth nothing. And in fact, I think the sales businesses are far more valuable than that. I think that's where the majority of the relationships lie, and the trust lies is in the sales side of things. A landlord might lose money on a letting, they might make money on it, they may have a great experience, but the trust that is built with an agent tends to be around the sales process, because there's so much more at stake. It's that, we used to say
emotion.
Yeah, it's emotion, and actually, on that note, if we are attracting talent into the industry, mostly we're attracting it into the sort of sales end of things, the lettings end of things, for whatever reason. And we could talk about the split between, male, female, and how we used to designate admin roles and whether it was exciting or boring. But the sales process is the sexiest bit, because that's the cut and thrust. That's the bit that makes your heart beat. When Ian said you've got those 3 touch points, it's valuation. So you're going in there to win their trust and win their business. Then you're negotiating the sale on the house. All of those sort of things there are really where the cut and thrust of it all is. And that's what you're remembered for. You won't be remembered for, he was a really safe pair of hands. He let my grandma's house out and it came back okay. Brilliant story. Great. But it's not the same as do you know what? We were expecting 250,000. He ended up getting us 280, and what a pleasure it was to deal with him. That's the difference, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think if you say I started my agency career in 2003, and I think back to the amount of people that I've moved multiple times, multiple times, or the referrals or the connections. If you're a good agent, like you mentioned, your phone rings. There might be a lifetime value of some of those clients, if you were to put it in business terms of where I am on the fees, 50, 60,000 pounds in different areas, more in different areas, less. But those clients that are going to call that back, you mentioned that particular company that's acquiring, and it's quite interesting because they acquired my old company where I was for 16 years recently. And I don't know what they acquired it for, but I know they've got a good lettings book, 10 branches, it's a big company. And I saw yesterday they rebranded, and without being controversial, it's probably the worst rebrand I've ever seen. So with being controversial,
there's no point saying that.
But the thing for me is that company spent 30 years building a brand, building an identity, and it had a good brand. It had a good identity, good boards, good website. It looked what it looked like. And I understand a brand uplift, but it was a total change. Colours, font, everything. Doesn't look anything like it anymore. And that's why I think we have these valuations that we have in the sales market, because those sort of companies don't understand the value in that side of things. If they change all of those boards, they won't look like the same company. And, you know, with 10 branches, there's a hell of a lot of agency boards, touch points, marketing touch points. All of a sudden just looks like a new agent. And I just think that's where those big companies are just missing
I think
basic
you're right.
business acumen from a marketing perspective, really, which it does blow my mind.
And it also rips the soul and personality out of a business afterwards. So, for instance, I know one of our local competitors who was in the market for years, and it tended to be in those days you operated under your name. So it was, you know, John Smith or whatever it was. Well, this particular John Smith was known as an estate agent far and wide around the area. And they then sort of rebranded it to a completely different corporate brand that nobody's ever heard of. Beautiful shop front, but nobody knows the people behind that, because, and actually, if you go in and meet them, you'll be lucky if those staff will still be there in a week or a month's time, because the churn in corporate agency is huge. It's massive. It's much more than they let on. So there's no continuity. There are no personalities behind the business. There's no accountability, and that's what it's about. So yes, you might not like dealing with David Mintz sometimes because he's busy and he might take a few more minutes to return your call than normal. But you know, ultimately he's accountable. You know where he is. You know where he sits. You know what his values are, and he's not running away anywhere. But I think these faceless corporate entities out there and are not doing us any favors when they're acquiring these businesses and then giving us the idea that, well, actually, you can just change the name of it like that and it doesn't affect the public trust. Well, it does. And what they find is that their lettings businesses tend to sort of have some sort of residual income, because it's more of a hassle to move a property away from a landlord than it is with sales. But the sales income will drop off a slope. So if you look at market share for companies that have been acquired on the basis of their lettings book, their sales book always tends to sort of go the other direction. And it's because that is where the relationship building is, and they don't have anybody to do it anymore. There's no personal touch and no personal accountability. I know that you guys sort of feed into that kind of personal agent or self-employed model, which is very popular. And I think it's a bit of a misnomer these days, but I think that you just have to go and look at a business like EXP and see the number of properties that they sell a year to understand that actually that has to have some value. It has to have value. We cannot just say it's lettings. So there you go.
And do you think, whilst we're on this detailed chat about valuation and if you're looking to sell your business, because it's a very valid point as you get to a certain age and you have to start planning for this. If you're an independent estate agency owner, is the mistake that many have made with their name above the door that they've not had the forethought of, how do I exit this business? How do I bring someone in and maybe amend the brand slightly so that those relationships can pass? Because that's the problem. If you've got a relationship and your name is above the door, you're the man that does all of the business, and it's your mobile phone that rings, are you not valuable? Because when you leave the business, then that value walks away. Is that the mistake that we've made as an industry?
I think it is a mistake that we made, and sort of my story is probably that it tells you the truth to that, is that, as far as the public are concerned, they don't know any different sometimes. I mean, not that we made a song and a dance, David's walking away from the business, he's going to be doing less of it. And in fact, we probably didn't tell them it, openly enough, because they didn't want to damage the brand. And that's the point. If people do buy people, then when they're coming to those businesses, it's because they've had a pleasant experience with Mark Worrell and they want that to continue. But there is nothing wrong, Mark, in this day and age of personal brand, where we're encouraging people to stay with us, but actually build up their own personal brand and their own business within a business, if you like. I think that, you know, whoever's name is above the door, or even if it has no name, but it's got a company name, that's got to stand for something. That's got to stand for the values of that particular brand. And then the people have to fit into that. Yeah. So if you've then got several employees that all feed into that overall ethos that, you know, David's brand is trust and reliability, for argument's sake, I don't know, then you're going to have all of these people that are buying into that, but they get to develop their own personality. We all have a sphere of influence, right? And it's what they teach you at networking. So we all have friends, we all have family, we all have, you know, a school playground that you'll go and pick your kids up in, or whatever it is. Wherever you go, you will meet people. And it's about leaving them with the impression, A, that you are a nice person, you're going to be a helpful person, a useful person to know, and let them know what it is that you do. Like, don't leave the room till they know what it is that you do with your life. And then if they know all of those things, they will come back to you. So I think, you know, when you look at the way that they build relationships in the States, if you like, with these big brokerages where you've got loads and loads of agents working for them, each one of those agents have got something unique that they bring to the table, and they have their own personal network as well. So I think we make the mistake sometimes of saying overall brand is the overall brand and everything else can go. I think, you know, what Ian does with this business, for instance, is remarkable. You've got people that, yes, they're buying into the overall ethos of avocado, and they are very much on brand and they've got the values, but they are also able to bring their own personalities to the table, and very much encouraged to milk that personal network for all it's worth.
I think the agency game is going through this transition. I don't know how long it's going to take. I think the transition's well and truly started because we're seeing these big corporates buying up. And if we used, I don't know, like a coffee shop example, because it's the easiest baseline to talk about in the local village, you know, you've got Starbucks, Costa, but then you've got the independents. And it's very clear now because Starbucks and Costa have got it so slick that, you know, Starbucks especially, it's a very slick operation. It looks the same in every single place that you go. You can order on the app. They've got the process down to a T. They've got their own identity with the menu and the orders, and just the whole thing is so slick. But if you hate the fact that Starbucks make a shed load of profit and don't pay any tax in the UK, then you're anti-Starbucks and you go to the independent because you like Jan, because your kids go to school with Jan and she's just trying to make a living and she's busting her lady balls to make that business work, and you support her. So you go in there and you probably pay 50p more for the hot chocolate, and maybe it's not as good as the Starbucks one, but you do it because that's the community thing to do. Agency hasn't got that yet, but I think we're going to see it over the next 5-10 years potentially, where the job of the corporates is to see, can they be as slick as a Starbucks, as a McDonald's, as a BMW? They're not at the moment. And that's why when they do the acquisition, the market share plummets. If the coffee shop was, there's no Starbucks in my village. If they bought the coffee shop, the Starbucks sales would increase. They've got the acquisition bit right. We got it wrong in agency. But the independent will always be the independent. And that's the job of the one-man band branches. You know, we've got an agency called Frank Shippers on the high street in Crowthorne. Frank's been in Crowthorne forever. It's a proper estate agency industry. He still does the viewings. When I was viewing to buy this house, I turned up and Frank was there to show me around the house. He'll always be the independent. He'll do 50 grand either side of up or down each year, and his phone will always ring. And there's power in that. But I think we're going through that transition where we either become the independent, hyper-local sphere of influence and the corporates. The job of the corporates is to see, can you do that? The only brand in the whole history of a estate agency that nearly did it and then sold and messed it up was Purple Bricks. They were the only one. They nearly cracked it. If the Bruces had stayed there, they would have done it. They would have been the household Starbucks in a estate agency. They would have, whether we like it or not, because their tech was better, their marketing was better, and the process was better. But they messed up because they sold out and they didn't perfect the service level. But you don't need the service that we're talking about.
The coffee's not going to make itself, you know. They took the order plan.
They nearly did it, but they messed up or the brand messed up when it's sold out. But I do think we will see that if one of those corporate giants can get that whole system and process right, and it will be less people, it will be less time, and people will want more time and more people, and they'll use the independent, and the ones that don't really care because they just want to pay 0.5%, 1% or whatever, they'll go to the corporate, and it's just paid right move advertising, isn't it, ultimately?
Yeah, and you've got that kind of mix of, now we're going to have this perfect intersection between corporate identity, if you like, and AI, where AI's job again is to sort of take away all the faff and just deliver you a point, to the point where you need it to be, but it's faceless. So, we can teach the AI it's great. I hear some companies out there that are basically they give their AI a name, so they'll call it whatever, Sheila or whatever it is, and it will have all the values of the company and all the tone and so on. But let's face it, nobody's queuing up to speak to Sheila. They want to speak to a Mark or Ian or the actual real Sheila. They want to speak to the people behind those agencies, and I think that it's really interesting. We spoke off camera before about kids. My kids are 13, 15 and 18. They have a deep distrust of anything AI generated. They cannot stand AI generated logos. We drive to work or wherever, to school, whatever. We pass this barbershop it's got a lovely picture of a dude with a massive curly mustache, and it says barbershop on it. Every time we pass by it, the kids will go, "Oh, it's AI generated that sign." And I'm like, why does it matter to you so much? And they have this, and what we need to appreciate is the next generation of house buyers and homeowners and sellers, they're being brought up in a day and age where it's hard for them to know who to trust. And we are making it harder by adding in automation that takes away that personal touch. So our job now as agents is actually to stay relevant, is to actually put the personality back in so that they know that there can only be one Ian Macbeth. There's only going to be one Mark Worrell. And that's the reason why I'm dealing with you, because I want that authenticity. If I wanted a Sheila, I'll just go on to ChatGPT and have a chat myself. So you've got efficiencies, and yes, and you have to have systems and processes, and they can do a lot of the heavy lifting. But I believe the real wins actually is bringing personality and relationships back to the forefront. It's really simple stuff. Pick up the phone and talk to people. You ask them how they are. Call, Stephen Brown will tell you, call 3 people every day. Just, one person that you haven't spoken to in a while that isn't a customer of yours at the moment, but you know them, they might be thinking of it. A past customer, see where they're up to, and then make sure that you're looking after your current customers as well. And if you do that, those conversations breed opportunities. I bumped into somebody yesterday who sort of said, "Oh, you're still in property?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll always be in property. What is it?" "Oh, I'm just completing on this tomorrow," and da 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 da. Now, had I not taken it, I could have literally just waved at him. We've known each other for years. I could have gone, "All right, mate," and then gone. I would have darted. I didn't. I took the time. We had a 5-minute chat. He's going to call me today, and I will get instructed on that development. And I'm not going up against anybody else. It's just because I will put in the time and care about what he's got to say. We need to sort of focus on that a bit more. We need to remember that that's the magic, and that the rest of it allows us to do the magic. Yeah.
I think it's a fabulous warning in bringing the kids in there, because I think, as we sit back, it might be easy to assume that, they'll want everything AI, but actually it's a good warning there just to say, find the bits that can find the efficiencies, but find the gold in the emotional connection that we make with buyers and sellers. And that, this has been a theme throughout our chat today. I think that's really the silver bullet that people are looking for actually can be built bit by bit by building emotional connection and relationships.
I think you have to remember how different generations are as well. When we're sort of talking about the kids, the teenage kids that you just spoke about, your kids that hate AI, it's really interesting because I got a real realization moment in the office yesterday. my marketing team, other than me and Cindy, sit between 18 and 22. That's the generation. And I said, did you guys watch Gladiators this weekend? It's like everyone watches Gladiators on the weekend, right? You all sit down as the family, we watch it. It's like nostalgic. You know, we saw the old ones. Our kids are now watching the new ones. They love it. But they're a gap in the middle. They're like, two of them said, "What's Gladiators?" I was like, what? How do you not know what? It's like the thought of watching terrestrial TV. What? And it just was a big realization moment to me that, you know, they are the future first time buyers. They don't even know what gladiators are. So you need to rethink, because we skipped the generation. Our kids will be fine. You know, our kids will probably quite like AI because, you know, I showed Grace, who's 9, a photo of me with a bald head to see what it would look like the other day, and she went, "Is that AI, Daddy?" And I went, "Yeah."
No, it's a couple of years' time is what it is.
But they know how to spot
but it's coming soon.
But they know how to spot it, and they're going to spend their entire lives trying to discern between a television advert to see whether the actor actually acted that or was it AI generated, and the boundaries between what is real and not real are blurring so much. It is up to us as a state, and we're a tiny fraction, we're a tiny industry, but we make a massive impact because we can be very loud, and it's up to us to step out from behind almost the camera and become larger than life, and really get that person that do stuff that a computer can't do. Yeah. Do stuff, have conversations that AI can't have, and put yourself out there in the real world as much as possible. I think that is the message. Because your mum's generation, I'm not talking about any of your mums in general, but in general, my mum's generation, for instance, they have this, they think that AI is magic because they don't understand how it works. They will put their entire trust in that. And that's the opposite end of the scale. It's like, and you've got this big gulf in between. So I think, trying to work out what is real in the future and therefore how it impacts on trust and relationships is a huge part of what we're going to be concentrating on as agents going forward.
And I think the magic there is probably the title for the podcast. So appreciate it, David. It's good to have a proper chat about all sorts of different things. We've gone all over the place in this conversation. That's what's great about this podcast. But hopefully people have taken a lot of value from it. And appreciate you coming on for the second time. On the third, like Soccer AM, they give out a football. There will be a prize, a present at some
fantastic.
point.
I want a golden microphone or something. Yeah, it'll be great.
Something just like that. No, appreciate you coming on, David. Thank you.
My pleasure. I'll leave you to it. See you soon.
Thanks, David.
Bye-bye.
A massive thank you once again to David Mintz from Coverful for joining us today. As we said in the intro, Ian, a really interesting chat that probably didn't go the way that you expect somebody who is promoting suppliers and tech and the advancement. But doesn't it just show that actually all of these plugins that you can get or tech advancements that you can get for your business don't go anywhere unless you do the proper stuff really well?
Yeah. And how often in a week does your mobile phone connect with a former client, a network, someone in your network for business? Yeah. And it's a good question to ask yourself as an agent, because if the answer is the business only comes from, the website or whatever, and it's not going directly to you because people don't know what you do or your network is not aware enough of what you do, then it's worth a rethink. It's worth a rethink of how you make sure that you attract that business. And maybe it comes through on the website, I used Ian 5 years ago, I've noticed blah, blah, blah. Fine. But how valuable are you to your network as an agent in the same way that maybe the local PT or, the local doctor or whatever, are you in people's network as part of their team, when they need you, like when you need a Sparky, when you need a plumber? Are you the agent that when someone needs an agent, you're the person they think of? And I think that what David has done through relationship building and spending time with people is incredibly valuable. you can do it that way, or you can do it through putting time and energy into videos and content creation, or just lifelong doing the right thing and being a really good agent and solving and fixing problems. But it's quite interesting as he mentions it, because there's some unbelievable value in that, regardless of if you're employed. You know, what name is above the door then ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. You can build those, and the thing I'm going to take away is build those emotional connections. It doesn't matter what your role is within the industry. It can be as simple as David said, how you pick up the phone, how you register the details for an applicant. Are you interested, or are you bang on to the next one? I think that's a really good lesson for estate agents. As now the market is getting busier as well, take a step back. Having listened to this episode now, can you go and implement and actually be disciplined enough to make sure that you're doing all those little things? Because I say, and it was David's answer really, estate agency, in my opinion, is a lot of little things either done properly or quite often not done at all. And I think that is the significance and the difference between a good estate agent and an order taker. And ultimately the difference there comes in fees. So yeah,
absolutely.
A massive thank you to David for joining us today. As you know, we do this because we love our industry. We want to see it improve and get better. If you have enjoyed today's episode, please share it out on social media, share it with colleagues, reach out to David, Ian, or myself. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.